So about 6 years ago, I stumbled across a PewDiePie video where he read the first chapter of what used to be his favorite manga, Ichigo 6,000,000%. Now, despite seeing a ton of harems, I've never seen or even heard of the series before, so I decided to check it out. I then watched the first 3 episodes, thought it sucked, and gave it a 3 out of 10. And that was and has been my experience with the series for the past 6 years. But because I'm the Harem reviewer, it's my duty to review every single harem anime that has ever been created. Ichigo, it's over 9,000% is a harem. I'm forced to review it, and that's what I'm going to do right now.
Big mouth.
So the anime begins with our main character Junpei, who goes to the school rooftop, but then some girl called Tojo does the flop and shows Junpei her nice ripe strawberry panties. She gets embarrassed, runs away, but forgets to bring her notebook with her. Junpei meets up with Tojo, gives her notebook back, and the two of them become
such good friends.
After that, Junpei does a pull-up in front of the smoking hot popular girl named Nishino and confesses his love to her. And her response to this is... Yep, so now Junpei and the blonde bimbo were going out, and that pretty much sums up the first episode. It's not bad, there's some fun moments and jokes, but overall I wouldn't say I liked it. That goes for the anime as a whole too. It's watchable and has some aspects that are decent, but it's just not enough for me to overall enjoy it. Its plot is simple, generic, and it's pretty much exactly what you'd expect to see in a harem. The first few episodes introduce all the main girls, and then the rest of the show is them trying to slurp the juices from Junpei's sack of spermy wormies. That's obviously fine and all, since that's how most harems are. However, there really isn't much that sets us apart from other harems and makes it stand out. As mentioned, Junpei starts dating Tojo in the first episode, which is genuinely surprising and interesting. There's a lot the show can do with having two of its main characters date from the start, but for some reason it drops this plotline fairly quickly. In episode 3, Nishino tells Junpei that she'll be attending a different high school than him, so the two of them will barely see each other. They see each other 2 more times after this, although they don't act like they're dating at all. Then Junpei goes to Nishino's house and she breaks up with him because she realized that there's no point for them to be going out. This was another surprising moment in the series, but more than that, it was also confusing. Again, what was the point of Junpei and Nishino going out if they were barely going to see each other and not even act like they were in a relationship? I guess the point is that Junpei is
kinda retarded.
But still, it's pretty weird. Anyway, besides that, this is a very standard and generic school harem romance. Junpei becomes homophobic after working at Chick-fil-A, he gets chocolates on Valentine's Day, and then starts making a movie with everyone. So yeah, if you've seen other and probably better harem rom-coms, then you're really not missing much here. Not even the Ichi in the series is good either. It's also tame, generic, and boring. I know my standards for Ichi are pretty high since I've been spoiled by the likes of Kiss X Sis and To Love Ru, but still, as an Ichi, this is just... So yeah, for the most part, the plot is generic and predictable, and because of that, I really don't have anything else to talk about. So I guess it's time to talk about its ending.
I'm going to rape you!
Junpei and everyone enter their second year of high school, and they all meet a new girl named Mizuzu, who's sort of a
bitch.
She joins Junpei's film club and decides to help them make a movie since she's a film critic, just like the legendary man himself, Doug Walker. Once the script is done for the film, everyone starts arguing over who the main heroine of it should be. One of Junpei's hipster friends suggests they don't use Tojo's script, which she overhears and then runs away crying. Junpei goes to cheer her up, and then everyone decides to cast Nishino as the heroine for the film. And that's how the anime ends. Kind of. So this is where the original 12-episode anime run ends, and as an ending, it kinda sucks. It does build up what I'm assuming is the next arc in the manga, but besides that, it's not a satisfying way to end the anime. Junpei and Tojo do get a nice moment together, but that's about it. Their relationship is still the same as before, and nothing has really changed. Now, I don't mind this last episode being weak, since again, this isn't technically the end for the anime. There's 5 OVA episodes that take place after this. Will they be good, or will they be... There's only one way to find out. So the first OVA episode takes place shortly after the anime ended. Junpei and everyone are filming their movie, some typical harem shenanigans occur, and that's pretty much it. The episode itself is kinda boring, and it's easily the worst in the whole show. The only interesting thing about it is that it came out 6 months before the anime even began, which is very bizarre. This is especially so since this takes place almost immediately after where the anime ended. Either way though, it's weird, but there's still 4 more episodes left.
Everybody do the flop!
Unfortunately, the rest of the OVAs aren't much better than this. Episodes 2 and 4 are kinda boring, plus they also introduced 2 new girls for pretty much no reason. I'm fine with Mizuzu being added to the cast, but did we really need another 2 girls, especially this early on in the series? Anyway, episodes 3 and 5 are somewhat fun and watchable. One of them has Junpei run around Nishino's high school, which is an all-girls school. He hides and gets chased by the staff, and it's not bad, but again, not good either. The last one has a pair of evil panties take over all the girls' bodies, which sounds great, but sadly it isn't. For most of the episode, we see all the girls act differently and strange, which is sort of fun and amusing. However, it, along with the other episodes, are held back due to poor pacing. These OVAs are a full 30 minutes long, and they definitely feel that way. There were some scenes and episodes in the series that felt slow and dragged out, but it's very noticeable here. These episodes did not need to be this long, and if they were shortened, they all probably would have been tolerable and some even decent. But besides their poor pacing, all of these episodes are just random nonsense. They don't continue the story or develop the characters, so you can skip these and you won't be missing much. The only noteworthy things in here are 2 new girls along with seeing Nishino's school, but that's about it. So yeah, the anime ends on a filler OVA episode, which sucks. This is just one of the many harem anime that ends without an ending, but I'm used to it by now.
Up your bitch!
Unfortunately, just like the plot, the cast is sort of generic too. That being said, even though the cast is mostly not that unique, I can't help but still enjoy some of them. The cast, as well as part of the show as a whole, is a bit of a guilty pleasure. It's not a so bad it's good sort of thing, but I know I probably shouldn't enjoy the show as much as I do. Anyway, as always, there's its main character Junpei, who's sadly pretty generic and forgettable. He's not the worst harem protagonist, he is a bit perverted, but still, he sucks. He has multiple hot mamas surrounding him that want to devour his sperm. Yet he's too much of a pussy to fuck any of them. The reason he doesn't choose any of the girls is because he's in love with all of them. So he's waiting to find out which one he likes the most before choosing, which isn't bad, but it's still annoying. This is especially so since it's pretty obvious who the best of them is, which I guess leads me to the waifu wars.
Up your bitch!
Kozue is a girl who's shy, and that's about it. The anime doesn't tell us much about her since she gets introduced in the 4th OVA episode and out of nowhere too. Seriously, there was no mention of her before this. She just shows up like she's been here the entire time. I'm assuming she gets a proper introduction in the manga, but as for the anime, she's worst girl because I know nothing about her. Just like Kozue, Chinami is another girl that gets introduced in the OVAs. She's lively and energetic, and that's about it. She doesn't get much screen time, so I know barely anything about her too. Despite being the second main heroine of the show, Nishino is pretty whatever. She shows up and leaves a lot, and because of that, she doesn't feel important. Like at all. She did date Junpei for a bit, but again, she didn't see him too often, and even when they were together, they never acted like they were dating. Nishino is probably the most confusing part of the series. I expected her to be as important as the other girls, but she just comes off as a side character that doesn't do a whole lot. Mizuzu is an asshole film critic that goes around yelling at people. Normally, I hate characters that go around screaming and being a bitch, but I actually ended up enjoying Mizuzu more than I thought I would. This is mostly because, again, she loves film a lot, so that's something that makes her stand out from the other hot mamas. Also, she's the only girl who doesn't have a crush on Junpei, which is different and refreshing. Then again, she might fall for him later in the manga, but I guess I'll just have to wait and find out. Tojo is the main heroine of the series, and she's fine. She's shy, likes to write novels, and also wants to suck Junpei's fingers. She used to wear her hair in pigtails and also wore glasses, but that all changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Now she keeps her hair down and uses contacts because my name's Jeff. Yui is Junpei's childhood friend, and she's alright. Out of the 4 main girls, she's the least important, but she's still fun when she's on screen. She likes getting naked in her sleep, and she also hates Satsuki because she took the #1 spot. So throughout this review, I really haven't said much positives about the show. I've said it has some fun moments, but I feel like I've been mostly lukewarm and negative towards the series. The plot really isn't good, and even though Mizuzu, Tojo, and Yui aren't half bad, they still don't carry the show. Now, Satsuki, on the other hand, she's genuinely a very fun and solid character. If it wasn't for her, the anime would easily be a 4 out of 10.
Want a break from the ads?
She hard carries the series and turns it from a bad and bland one to a tolerable and watchable one. Satsuki isn't just good because all the other girls are mid at best. As a standalone character, she's great and she deserves to be in a much better Harem series than this. Anyway, Satsuki starts off as a mean and loud girl who hates Junpei, but after about a week of hanging out with him, she realizes that he's fun to be around and then confesses to him. Now, girls hating the main protagonist but then falling for them isn't anything new. Plenty of shows have done this before, but what makes Satsuki so distinct is that she changes in such a short amount of time. Also again, she ends up confessing to him at the very end of her first episode. That's crazy to see a character change that drastically in such a short time period. For the remainder of the series, Satsuki becomes a super fun and clingy girl that wants to fuck Junpei's brains out, which is why she's best girl by a landslide. I sure can't wait to pull a Kurt Cobain after seeing her get rejected by Junpei in the manga though. I have no faith that she'll win, but I can still dream.
Friday, gotta get down on Friday.
The anime was animated by I Am the Legend 27 themselves, Studio Madhouse. Now, despite being animated by the GOAT of anime studios, Ichigo 1000% doesn't look impressive. Like at all. It's fine, I guess. It's a bit better than your typical harem, but then again, that's not saying much. Characters are usually well drawn, but in terms of animation, it's pretty standard. If you told me literally any other studio like JC Staff or Zebex animated this, then I would believe you. But yeah, for Madhouse standards, this sucks, but as a harem anime, it's not half bad.
Big mouse. Big mouse, big mouse.
Bitch.
Surprisingly, the anime soundtrack is actually good. There's a decent amount of memorable and upbeat tracks, plus its opening and ending themes are good too. I don't see myself listening to the main OST again, but I'm glad I listened to it at least once. Anyway, one thing that does suck about the show is that it never got dubbed, which means I was forced to watch it subbed, which is
Disgusting!
Bitch.
Well, that was Ichigo 100,021's anime, and it was mediocre. Its plot is generic, and most of its characters aren't anything special. That being said, it still does have its moments, and it is heavily carried by Satsuki alone, which is very impressive. Whenever she's on screen, I actually end up enjoying myself, and it feels like I'm watching a completely different show. But while Satsuki is great, the rest of the show sadly isn't, which is why I'm giving the anime a 5.44 out of 10. Well, that was the anime, but as usual, it's time to take a look at the manga. On MyAnimeList, it's rated considerably higher than the anime, so I have some minor expectations for it. I'm sure it'll be better than the anime since the story will continue, characters will develop, and most importantly, it'll end with Junpei picking one of the girls. But I could also see it being worse if the plot drags on and goes nowhere. I'm sure I'll also be annoyed by the ending since there's literally no chance Junpei will pick best girl Satsuki, but I guess there's only one way to find out.
Fuck you!
Bitch. The fuck. Bitch.
Well, I read the manga, and Jesus Christ, it's Jason Bourne. It sure is something alright. The manga is 19 volumes and totals at 167 chapters, which is sort of long for a harem rom-com. It's also one of the many problems with it, although I'll get to that shortly. Anyway, because it's decently long, I've decided to review it in 3 sections. This is because it's easier for me, plus all 3 sections are notably different in terms of quality. Although it's obvious, I'll be covering the entire manga, so here's another spoiler warning.
Big mouse.
Excluding the OVAs, the anime adapted the first 66 chapters, however there's some notable differences. The beginning is a lot slower than the anime. There's multiple chapters that are exclusive to just the manga. For example, there's a few chapters where Junpei accidentally takes Nishino's phone from her bag. He thinks she'll get mad at him for taking it, so Tojo says that she'll take the blame for him. This somehow leads to Junpei jumping out of a window from the school's second floor and then landing in a pond. Chapter 10 has Junpei go to Nishino's house where he gets mistaken for a peony thief, and another one has them both go on a date. It isn't until chapter 17 where Nishino tells Junpei that she'll be going to a different high school. Just for comparison, this happened in only episode 3 of the anime, which is a pretty big difference. These chapters aren't entirely necessary, and I get why the anime skipped over a lot of them, especially with its limited amount of episodes. However, there is one good thing these chapters do, which is that it actually shows the time Junpei and Nishino spend as a couple. In the anime, it was bizarre and confusing to see the two of them get together just to quickly drift apart 2 episodes later. So although these chapters aren't anything special, I'm fine with most of them being here. Another change is that Satsuki gets introduced before Yui. In the anime, she appeared in episode 3, but here it wasn't until chapter 39. So yeah, there are some big differences between the two, although for the most part you can skip these chapters if you've already seen the anime. However, if you're a fan of the anime and haven't read the manga yet, then I'd recommend just reading the whole thing. Anyway, there's not too much to say about these chapters that I haven't already said before while talking about the anime. For the most part, the story is still pretty weak and slow. Yes, there are things that develop, but they're usually so minor that they barely matter. It's not too big of a problem here since these are still some of the earlier chapters and they're mainly meant to introduce all the characters. Speaking of characters, there's one who's completely missing from the anime, which is Amachi. He gets introduced in chapter 46 and he immediately falls in love with Tojo. He's one of the better additions to the cast since he tries to get funky with Tojo, plus he's a decently fun character too. Also, I ship him with Satsuki since it's obvious that she isn't going to end up with Junpei. Anyway, the first 66 chapters are tolerable. Satsuki scenes are still by far the best, but everything else is pretty standard. Towards the end of the last section, I was getting a bit bored with the manga, but by now I really had enough. Like I said, the manga is longer than it needed to be, and it's really obvious during these chapters. This is the shortest section, but also by far the worst. Its main problem is its story, or lack thereof. Again, things do happen and develop, but it's usually so little that it doesn't matter. Also, the cliche of something big about to happen, but then getting interrupted is more obnoxious than ever here. For example, in chapter 87, Junpei and Tojo are about to kiss, but then, stinky Nishino comes in, so now they don't. The worst of these has to be chapter 93, where Satsuki says that she's transferring to another school since her parents are getting divorced. When I read this, I actually felt something, since Satsuki is by far best girl, so to see a lot less of her was going to suck. Although at the same time, I was also kinda glad that this happened, since it felt like something major was finally happening. Another thing this chapter did was make me hate Junpei even more. Since the manga is long, that means we get to see him be indecisive for so much longer than in the anime, which is extremely frustrating. Before this, I didn't like Junpei, but the more the series goes on, the more I fucking hate him. In this chapter, he realizes that he took Satsuki for granted since he thought that she'd always be with him. However, it turns out that Satsuki's parents aren't getting divorced after all, so now nothing is going to change. That also goes for Junpei too, since he doesn't treat Satsuki any differently than before. Wow. What a fucking asshole. Satsuki, aka best girl, was about to leave you, and now that she's back, you aren't going to do anything. You couldn't even tell her that you're happy that she's back and not leaving? Fuck you.
Up your ass.
In chapter 75, Chef PP gets introduced, who becomes a potential love interest for Nishino. He's not nearly as likable as Amachi, plus he also just feels like a repeat of him. He's just another love rival for Junpei that a lot of girls fawn over, just like Amachi is. Chapter 82 introduces Chinami, who's the worst addition. She doesn't add much, can be removed, not much will change, and she's also a bitch. She only wants guys for their money, she's an asshole, and she's sucks. Although not as big of a problem, its comedy and Ichi are still weak. There are funny moments as well as decent Ichi scenes, such as in chapter 81 where Junpei and Nishino sneak into their middle school at night. It's a decent chapter and by far the best out of this bunch. There's also chapter 96 where Nishino tells Junpei that she's going to Paris to study baking. This is probably the only major thing that happens in these chapters that actually affects the story. It makes Junpei wonder if he has a chance with Nishino since she'll be gone for a few years, so maybe he's better off with Tojo instead. But yeah, out of these 35 chapters, there's only a few that aren't half bad, with the rest mostly being frustrating filler. They aren't terrible or anything, but again, they're mainly just annoying and could have been removed or at least trimmed down significantly. Anyway, before I get to the final section, I guess I'll quickly go over its art, which is good. Character designs are nice, but also nothing too special. Surprisingly, the manga is very consistent with its art. From the first all the way to the last chapter, the manga always looks the same. Character designs do change slightly, but that's more so because the characters get older, not because the style changed or anything. The only negative thing is that there's a handful of pages that have too much text on them. It's not too often, but it's enough where I feel like complaining.
Bitch.
What do you say to some funny
Up your ass.
The last third of the manga is actually
Okay.
This is mainly due to a lot of the problems being addressed and fixed. For starters, there's its plot, which actually goes somewhere. Junpei starts studying to try and get into a decent college. Amachi decides to stop being nice to all the girls in school and only talks to Tojo since he's more serious about exploring her cave of wonders. Although barely, there's hints that Amachi and Satsuki will get together. Nishino gets asked to marry Chef Pee-Pee, which makes sense since she shares the same dream as him and they'd both be together in Paris anyway. Satsuki decides to finally give up on Junpei and become just friends. This turns out to be just a way for her to try and get him to like her, but at least it happens for about 15 chapters, so it's not just a one chapter thing. The same goes for Chinami and the octopus guy getting together. They do break up later on, but at least they're together for a decent handful of chapters. The plot still isn't great, but it kept me invested even during the filler or less important chapters. Another thing that's improved are its characters. Junpei is still awful, but during these chapters, he's less irritating than usual. When he's talking to a new girl called Mukai, he explains why he loves film, which is a side of him we don't see too often. Yes, we know that he loves film, which is why he makes movies with everyone, however we don't see him express himself like this that often. If we got more scenes like this that helped flesh out Junpei and made him less generic, then maybe he wouldn't be so dislikable and detestable. At least he asked Nishino to be his girlfriend again, which is pretty cash money. Anyway, besides Junpei, there's the girls, and surprisingly, it looks like I'm gonna have to do another waifu war. Literally every character besides Satsuki has changed spots, so let's get on with the waifu wars round 2.
Up your bitch.
Like I already said before, Chinami is a
bitch.
She's obnoxious, she's an asshole, and I don't like her. She does go out with Octopus Man, but then dumps him, so she can go
Die in a fucking fire. Please.
Yui went from being second best in the anime to being second worst in the manga. She doesn't really do that much and seems kinda pointless. She does like Junpei, but she never tries to do anything about it. It's probably because she'd rather Nishino or Tojo be with him, but still, Yui doesn't do much, which is why she's so low. Mizuzu is still the same as before. She's fun, although after she gets introduced, she doesn't do a whole lot either. Tojo is also still the same as before. She's alright, although she needs to learn to
Be assertive.
When I watched the anime, I must have been snorting crack kokani from a chipmunk's butt crack because I was completely wrong about Nishino. She's one of the best characters and she's only a nipple hair away from second place. I'm going to assume I liked her more since the beginning chapters focus more on her. Plus, a lot of her chapters tend to be some of the better and more interesting ones too. In chapter 80, Nishino explains that she liked Junpei before he asked her out, which changed my whole perspective on her. Originally, I thought she went out with him because he was funny, but it turns out that wasn't true. The chances of her being with Junpei are also low since she's moving to Paris for a few years. Also, it's pretty obvious that Tojo is more suited for Junpei too. Because of all these things, Nishino manages to be a genuinely good character, and I was rooting for her to be with Junpei since Satsuki had no chance. Mukai went all the way from worst to second best girl, but that's mainly because she was barely in the anime. She's the last girl to get introduced in the manga, which sucks since she's pretty fun. She's a big shy pervert that's afraid of men, although she's fine being around Junpei. She's not that important and could be removed without much problems. However, she gets a surprising amount of attention, which is good since again, she's fun. Yeah, Satsuki is still best girl. If you disagree, then you're wrong! Not only are its plot and characters better, but its comedy and Ichi are stronger too. They still aren't great or anything, but there is a notable improvement. For example, there's chapters 105 and 106 where Satsuki is in a disguise and stalks Junpei and Mukai. The jokes work because of how stupid the situation is, and the Ichi isn't half bad either. Then again, they're probably just better here since Mukai is very kawaii. Anyway, we're at the end game now, since Junpei and Nishino were finally going out again. However, that's not all, because Nishino was still going to move to Paris soon, and also Tojo confesses to Junpei. But surprise, motherfucker, Junpei turns her down like a boss. His testicles finally swell up, and he tells her that right now he's going out with Nishino. But despite being turned down, Tojo becomes a futanari and grows a pair of balls herself. She hugs and kisses Junpei while he's sleeping, so that's spicy goodness.
Like a boss.
Anyway, Nishino leaves for Paris and breaks up with Junpei. It's then the last day of school and Junpei and everyone else graduates, which brings us to the final chapter. Satsuki is working at her family restaurant and unfortunately hasn't gotten laid yet. More surprising is that she didn't end up with Amachi, since I thought the two of them had good chemistry together. Shinami is a big fat whore, Mizuzu runs a production company, and Tojo is an author. As for Junpei, he does a lot of manual labor since he hasn't been able to get into the film industry yet. Anyway, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, who did he end up choosing? Is it Tojo, Nishino, Yui, Satsuki, or even John C. We'll find out after this commercial break. Anyway, we're back, and of course Junpei ended up choosing no fucking way. There's no way Junpei ended up picking Nishino. This entire time he's been in love with Tojo, so why did he go back with Nishino? It makes no sense. Him and Tojo are meant for each other. Junpei was able to inspire Tojo to write novels, and Tojo helped make Junpei's movies better. When the two of them drifted apart in the last couple chapters, Tojo's novels got worse, and the same happened with Junpei's movies. Both of them have the same dream of writing and making art, so why would Junpei pick Nishino? It makes no goddamn sense. It also doesn't help that this feels so rushed too, since this only takes up 4 pages. The rest of the chapter is everyone having a reunion together, which feels like a waste. It's insane that the moment everyone was waiting for just feels like an afterthought or more of an obligation. The author was like, oh shit, I only have 4 pages left, so she crammed this in at the last minute. The thing is, despite everything I've said, I still wanted Nishino to end up with Junpei since I like her more than Tojo. Also, Tojo being picked was way too obvious, so I'm glad I got bamboozled. However, again, this isn't satisfying despite me wanting Nishino to win. This is so rushed, confusing, and disappointing. It's not a terrible ending, and I'm not sure if picking Tojo would have been better. It probably wouldn't, since it'd most likely be rushed and again, would have been way too predictable. But either way, this is not a good ending. I'm glad Nishino won, but unfortunately, it's not very satisfying. Also, let's have a big moment of silence for Satsuki. Anyway, besides that, there's a bonus chapter which shows that Mizuzu ended up getting together with a guy at college. Mizuzu is an alright character, and I'm glad we got this, although Satsuki definitely should have gotten this chapter instead. Mizuzu isn't that important, and I'm sure there's a lot more fans of Satsuki than Mizuzu. But still, for what this is, it's not half bad and a fun bonus chapter. However, that's not the only bonus chapter we get, since there's also Ichigo 100% East Side Story. It's a 4-chapter sequel manga that was released 12 years after the original series ended. It takes place a few years after graduation, where we see Tojo meet a guy named Nakama who looks and sounds very similar to Junpei Monica. Yeah, that's right. It just so happens that there's a dude who looks, sounds, acts, and has a nearly identical name to Junpei who is also in love with Tojo. It's just as terrible and stupid as it sounds, which is why I don't recommend reading it. This is genuinely offensive, not only to Tojo fans, but to all fans of the series. Tojo learning to move on from Junpei is a good idea, however, this is not how you do it. You can't have her move on by having her get with a bootleg version of Junpei. That's just retarded. That defeats the whole meaning of moving on, since she still sees and most likely always will see part of Junpei in this new guy. Wouldn't it make sense to have someone that's completely different from Junpei get together with her? Amachi was kind of an ass towards the end since he tried to kiss Tojo, but I'd still prefer him getting with her instead of thrift shop Junpei. Anyway, would you believe me if I said that wasn't even the worst part? Satsuki sees not Junpei and immediately falls for him. She acts like a slut and tries to steal his nectar, but he refuses since he says that he's only in love with Tojo. She then gives up and leaves him alone, but either way, this is infuriating. It's one thing to ruin Tojo's character, but to defile Satsuki like this, that's just too far. If you're watching this, Kawashita Mizuki, I hope you're happy, because I fucking hate this. One day I'm going to walk all the way to Japan, find out where you live, and... Anyway, the manga has an open-ended ending, which is also frustrating. You went out of your way to create this terrible manga, yet you're not even going to give us a clear ending. It hints at Tojo getting together with not Junpei, but still, it's not clear, which sucks. East Side Story is pretty terrible. Its concept is awful, it ruins Tojo and Satsuki, and it doesn't even have a definitive ending either. If you're a fan of Ichigo 100%, then do yourself a favor and don't read this giant pile of scorpion fecal matter. East Side Story is basically the sequel to 9/11. It's AIDS 2.25 out of 10. Anyway, I got so distracted by its bonus content that I forgot to give my final thoughts on the actual manga. Ichigo 100% is a gigantic mixed bag. Its first third is readable, its second is mainly dragged out and frustrating, but thankfully its final third is genuinely decent despite its clusterfuck of an ending. There are things to like in the manga, but the series mainly suffers from being too little too late as well as being longer than it needed to be. Yes, the last 60 chapters are decent, but you have to get through a lot of fluff to get to that point. Some of that fluff isn't half bad, but some of it can be pretty annoying to read through. So overall, I don't recommend the manga, which is why I'm giving it a 5.49 out of 10. Well, that's going to do it for this video. If you liked it and want to see more, you can help by leaving a like, comment, sharing, and subscribing. You can also support me on Patreon and can now even become a member of my channel here on YouTube. Anything helps, and I appreciate every single one of you guys and girls. Anyway, peace out, bronies, and remember to vote for Donald J. Trump this November.